This week's Wednesday Warfare is sponsored by BetterHelp. Hello, and it's time for Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. And as always, like what you like, don't be a dick, let's begin. This week's NXT begins with a match between Dakota Kai and Rhea Ripley. The winner will face Io Shirai for the Women's Championship at TakeOver 30. They mentioned on commentary how Dakota's trying to prove she doesn't need Raquel Gonzalez in her corner to win matches, which makes me wonder, where has she been recently anyway? It's a great match, a lot of good back and forth here in this matchup. In the end, they're fighting in the corner and the referee is distracted, which allows Mercedes Martinez to jump out of nowhere, attack Rhea, and that allows Dakota to capitalize and win the match. So she's going on to face Io Shirai for the championship. But then, after that match is over, we then see Mercedes get back in the ring and hit the air raid crash onto Rhea afterward. And we discover a little promo segment later on outside Full Sail that, Robert Stone says Rhea Ripley may be done with the Robert Stone brand, but the Robert Stone brand is not done with Rhea Ripley. Clearly some fallout here, some revenge on their mind after what happened at Great American Bash, and there's no mistake what matchup we're seeing, presumably at TakeOver, Rhea Ripley and Mercedes Martinez, which should be good. Up next, Bronson Reed taking on Shane Thorne, and my question is, where's Brendan Vink? And more importantly, what happened to Thorne and Vink's little mini push on Raw a couple of months ago, early in the pandemic, when MVP was managing them for a bit? What happened to those guys? I don't know, on Raw. Anyway, it's a relatively short but a fun match, really action-packed here. They exchange some strikes at first, and Thorne goes to the air soon after. Ultimately, Bronson hits the Death Valley driver and the big top rope splash to win the match. A nice little bit of momentum for Bronson going into the ladder match TakeOver. We see some footage from earlier in the day when Breezango are making their way to the building, and all of a sudden they get jumped by Legado del Fantasma and then thrown into their van, and they drive off. Like, damn, these fools just kidnapping people in broad daylight now. Later in the night, we see the three guys, Legado del Fantasma, make their way to the ring. They're dragging an unconscious Fandango in with them in the arena. Santos Escobar says the lucha community demands to be taken seriously, and he takes great offense to how Breezango mocked their culture at Great American Bash. Al pops Tyler Breeze. So if they had Fandango and they kidnapped him, then what happened to Tyler and why did he come through a different way? Anyway, Tyler Breeze gets destroyed as well, and then Santos makes a threat toward Isaiah Swerve Scott, saying, "Don't mention my name again." So they seem to be building up that next program for both men. That seems to be the collision course for the Cruiserweight title, it would seem. Ladder match qualifier triple threat. You got Damien Priest versus Oni Lorcan versus Ridge Holland, the former rugby star who's on loan from NXT UK. He looks pretty impressive here. For someone who I'd never seen before this matchup, I was definitely taken aback by what I saw here. Throwing Priest around like he was nothing was pretty impressive. Oni, though, was my favorite competitor in this match. I love the fire that he brought here in this thing. The match does end when Priest hits the Reckoning on Lorcan to win and advance. Like I said, pretty darn good matchup here. Probably my favorite on the night for NXT. Well, last week, Cameron Grimes talked a bit too much trash toward Keith Lee and paid for it, so now we have this matchup between the two of them as a result. This is another great match. Lots of back and forth in this one here. Grimes makes it a lot more competitive than it could have been. It really could have been easily one-sided, but it's very competitive here. Lee starts to abuse Grimes by the end as we go clothesline after clothesline after clothesline, clearly like taking out his pent-up aggression toward Karrion Kross here on Grimes. Hits the Spirit Bomb to win the match. This is non-title, by the way. We then hear a woman's voice speaking in a foreign language over the speakers. Then we see Karrion Kross's face on the big screen where he says, Regal's not around these days, so, Keith Lee, you're the man to make these matches happen, and if you won't give me the title shot that I want, then this will be on your hands. He backs away to reveal like a wrecked and trashed locker room with Danny Burch laid out there. I thought there was more than one person laid out, but I think it was Danny. But yeah, I just hated the way that Tom Phillips segued out of that segment. It's like, well, it seems like Karrion Kross is going to let the body count rest. It's like, dude, he just laid the fuck out of somebody, like in cold blood for no reason. You should take this more seriously and make it seem more important than you're letting on with this. Speaking of William Regal, he shows up to make some changes regarding the ladder match. First off, Dexter Lumis is out with an ankle injury. He will not be in that one. So his spot will be taken by the winner of the final triple threat match happening next week. And then after that, the final two spots in the five-man match will be filled up by the winners of two singles matches between the four guys who were not involved in the finish of those triple threat matches. You've got Ridge Holland, Finn Balor, Johnny Gargano, and the fourth person to be determined after that last triple threat match. Sounds a bit convoluted, sounds like a bit of a process, but we'll get there. Damien Priest is interviewed outside the building and says he doesn't care who else is going to be in the ladder match. All he knows is he's going to win. Bronson Reed, elsewhere in the parking lot, hollers at him and congratulates him for his win on the night. And Priest comes up to him and says, well, I'm still going to win a takeover. And Bronson's like, prove it. And Damien's like, make me. And so basically, after all that, we decide we're going to have a match between these two next week on NXT. Then we see Pat McAfee, special guest of the Undisputed Era. Tonight, he joins the commentary team for the rest of the evening. And right away, this really exposes just how weird the setup is for commentary right now in NXT, because he joins Tom Phillips at the desk. There's clearly no one else around him, but we still hear the voices of Beth Phoenix and Mauro Ranallo throughout. Where are they in this configuration? I'm so confused. The next matchup sees Tegan Nox versus Indy Hartwell. Not much to say about this one. It's a pretty short and sweet match. Tegan wins with the shiniest wizard. Main event time as Imperium defend the tag titles against Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly of the Undisputed Era. Lots of hype in this episode about the return of the Undisputed Era, how they're making a big old comeback, and Happy Days will be here once again very soon. They're billing Fish and O'Reilly as like reuniting on the night. It's like a weird reunion tour vibe. This team has never broken up, and I didn't know that like they broke up. The phrase of reuniting Fish and O'Reilly made no sense to me. The match itself is pretty good. There's a point though where there's a diving headbutt, and Mauro on commentary goes, Harley Race would have been proud of that diving headbutt. I'm like, didn't Harley Race go on the record saying he regrets ever having done the diving headbutt because of all the damage it caused to his head and neck? Anyway, the real story with this is not the match itself, but it's Pat McAfee on commentary, who says that the problems with him and Adam Cole have been resolved, but clearly something else is amiss here because he just keeps, knocking Adam Cole, make all these short jokes and everything. He's really smarmy on commentary, to the point where Beth Phoenix gets frustrated and leaves, and her disembodied voice just disappears from the commentary desk. You don't hear her again. And then finally, Adam Cole is within earshot of all this. He finally confronts Pat to his face and everything. And while that's going on in this whole distraction, Triple H and Shawn Michaels and other officials are coming to kind of pull them apart and everything. The Imperium hit a European bomb to win the match and retain. And then afterward, there's more spats between McAfee and Cole. Pat goes to leave. Then he turns around and calls him a short little bitch. And like Cole's just blown a gasket out. He's like, I'll kill you. I'll kill you. He's going to kill a dude over a short joke. Anyway, McAfee does kind of a punt kick to Cole, who's like over the announce table. He face plants on the ground and he's laid out. Big heel Hollywood McAfee here to end the show as, oh boy, what a smarmy heel is going to get his. Look, I don't hate this angle. I just don't care about this angle. Like I said last time this got brought up, I just don't. This is not doing much for me. I don't care about Pat McAfee. I think it's unique that they're taking like, oh, here's an outsider who's not from wrestling and they're going to make him a heel. How often have we seen that? It's usually the outsiders is automatically a babyface because they're going to go against the heel who can carry them through a match. But we're not getting that here. It's clearly that McAfee is the big heel, but there has got to be a better way to turn Undisputed Era Adam Cole babyface than this. There just has to be. This angle, no bueno for me. Now, before I move on to Dynamite, I want to talk for a minute about mental health. Keeping your mental health in check is incredibly important, especially nowadays when it feels like everything in the world is going wrong. That is why BetterHelp is sponsoring this week's Wednesday Warfare. Now, not as a spokesman for BetterHelp, I'm also a client. I have been using BetterHelp and their counseling services for the last 2 or 3 months now, and it's been really helpful to me. It's really helped me deal with a lot of my anxieties in this crazy new world we're in lately, my anxieties as a parent and so forth. Now, online counseling may not be for everybody, but in this world we live in today where so many other things are being done remotely, online counseling can be a really great resource. You can get high quality professional counseling from BetterHelp 4 ways. There's phone call, there's live chat, there's video chat, there's messaging. You're paired up with a counselor based on your needs that you enter in when you sign up, and then you and the counselor figure out which form of communication is right for you. Now, when you sign up with BetterHelp, you get 4 weekly sessions per month, not to mention unlimited messaging with your counselor day or night. There's financial aid available if you need it, and also it's available anywhere in the world. So take that next step. Go to BetterHelp using my link at the top of the description. Get 10% off your first month by clicking that link. BetterHelp has been very helpful to me the last several months, and I hope it can be helpful to you as well. Thanks for listening, and now on to the other half of this review. So last week, AEW began with a 10-man tag team match, and they said, no, that's not nearly enough. We have to up the ante next week and do a 12-man tag match. So we've got FTR and the Elite taking on the Dark Order and Colt Cabana. I like how the show opened up with just like all the guys are in the ring at once, get these group shots and the lower thirds. I did love the little lower third comment. Totally all getting along for the Elite and FTR. That was great stuff. It's kind of hard to call the action with this one. There's just so many bodies, but I will say it is far more coherent and enjoyable of a tag team match than the 10-man tag we had last week. Dash Harwood appears to injure his leg partway through the match, so FTR is gone, and Adam Page goes with them for the back for a little bit. So it's actually not a true 12-man for a while. It's more like 6-on-3. I think it's that numbers advantage. The fact you don't have all of those bodies in the ring at once, making the match feel like it flowed a bit better, if that makes any sense. Page does come back a few minutes later, though. It's a house of fire in his big comeback. There's a wild finish that sees Brody Lee hitting Page with the discus elbow to win the match with the Dark Order. Like I said, this was a good opener and much better than the 10-man match we saw last week, by far. More tag team action up next as Santana and Ortiz take on the Best Friends. This is another fun match here. I just love these two teams, and them being able to work together is really entertaining stuff. As the match goes on, Ortiz talks trash to the camera toward Trent's mom, Sue, because you saw the Best Friends roll up in Sue's van earlier in the show. And so in the end, though, the street sweeper attempt is thwarted. Trent rolls up Ortiz to win. But we're not done with this angle yet, because later on, we see Santana and Ortiz just beat the bejesus out of Sue's van. They're breaking the windows. We do get some illusion-killing camera shots from inside the van as it's going on. Like, oh, why would you do that? But anyway, they smash the windows. They graffiti all over it. Like, one of them writes Sue's name and then X's it out. Like, man, what's Sue ever do to you? Poor Sue getting targeted like that. And then we see, like, next, we see the Best Friends cutting a promo in front of the van, and it's on bricks. The tires are just gone now, and it's even more trash than it was before. And a great promo from Chucky T and Trent talking about how, Trent's mom's van got ruined. And now they're going to have a match, and it basically says, if you want a rematch, all you have to do is ask. And now they say that when they beat Santana and Ortiz again, they'll have to apologize to Sue on speakerphone. Oh, everyone's going to hear it then. But in all seriousness, though, I did get a kick out of this angle here tonight. I've seen worse and dumber things start feuds in wrestling before, like tweets, for example. So somebody bashing somebody else's mom's car, not very big on terrible reason to start an angle list for me. We get a short update from MJF at his campaign headquarters, which he rules with an iron fist. But the poll numbers are way up, and they show a full screen graphic where MJF's pulling at 100% and Jon Moxley's like -88 or something ridiculous. And he says even though he's got the guaranteed title match at All Out, the campaign will not stop. And somebody off camera asks, well, what happens if Darby Allin wins the title tonight? MJF doesn't sound too worried about that. And then back in the ring, we see Matt Hardy cutting a promo where based off the bat he says, the fans want him to stick to just being Matt Hardy, so that's what he'll do. I'm like, oh, that's disappointing. I liked Matt Hardy switching all the gimmicks and stuff. That was fun. I liked Broken Matt Hardy. But anyway, no more swapping gimmicks apparently. But he says, he wants to give back to wrestling and he wants to give back to people. But Sammy Guevara hasn't listened to him. And so now that, you've given me a figurative middle finger to the face, I don't care about you anymore. As he's talking, Guevara sneaks up from out of the ring and gets in the ring. But Hardy sees him coming, says, I knew you'd come. A little bit of the brokenness still in there. They start fighting for a bit. They're on the outside, fighting on the timekeeper's table, and it breaks into pieces. Matt brings the table out, but it backfires on him. Sammy hurls a chair, really unsafe looking, at Matt's head. I don't know if the blood came hard way or not, but the way that Sammy threw that chair made me suspect something, but it just looked pretty ugly, and then the blood just, it was so disgusting. Matt Hardy is one of those all-time great bleeders in wrestling. We saw it with Edge years ago, and we see it here in this one. It's just, it's just crazy how much the pool is there, because Sammy does a big twisting dive off the stage through the table, and you can see Sammy's already covered in blood, and Matt just looks like a total wreck. I did like this segment here. I like that they've now that Sammy is back, they can finally kind of restart that angle that they were starting over a month ago, and I was a fan of the angle then, and I like how it's developing here. It's good to see Sammy back like this. Matt Cardona, the former Zack Ryder, makes his in-ring debut for AEW alongside his friend Cody as they take on Alex Reynolds and John Silver of the Dark Order in tag team action. Cody takes the brunt of the offense in this match. The story is Cardona with the hot tag being a big house of fire. Cardona hits Silver with the radio silence to win the match, and then afterwards, Scorpio Sky, who made some big statements on Dark the night before, basically gets right in Cody's face and wants a title shot, so they'll be fighting for the TNT title next week. It's the first week, by the way, since Cody won the belt that he's not defended it. That's his tag team match. But anyway, the match itself was okay. It's a good first showing for Cardona. I want to see what else he can provide for AEW. I hope he can kind of overcome whatever stigma he may have of being Cody's friend and is able to kind of like branch out and do his own thing and not be tied down and maybe help to erase the stigma that AEW has in a lot of cases lately, where it's the friends of the execs coming in and getting jobs. Like I am happy for Matt Cardona to be there, but I hopefully he can kind of earn his keep and be a valued part of the roster. It's time for the debate between Chris Jericho and Orange Cassidy, and I believe this has to be the first debate I've ever seen that has pyro at the start of it. Your guest moderator is Eric Bischoff, back on TNT wrestling programming for the first time in 20 years. Very cool to see. I was expecting Soul Train Jones, but he threw me for a loop with Eric Bischoff. Yeah, I love Eric Bischoff as a performer, just don't give him the book anymore, I swear to God. Jericho comes out in a very nice suit, and Orange Cassidy is just dressed as himself, but he puts on a clip-on tie later on. And the whole story, Jericho's got these big verbose answers, knocking down Orange every chance he gets and everything, while Cassidy, for the first couple of questions, is still pretty quiet, doesn't say anything, but he does have a big response in the back pocket for when the third question is about rising sea levels and global warming, so he rattles that off pretty well while Jericho is just kind of gobsmacked at him. Finally, Orange can stand no more, and he tells Chris to shut up. It's kind of like the Silent Bob moment in those Kevin Smith movies where he finally says something at the very end or something like that. He says, Jericho, this match is the biggest of my career, but it's also the biggest of your career, because what'll happen to you if you get beat by the guy who puts his hands in his pockets? So what's going to happen when I embarrass you? And just his delivery there, God, for someone who doesn't talk, and when he does talk, he doesn't talk with a lot of energy in his voice. God, what a great promo. I mean, it's one of those things where you can't bust it out every week because you kind of lose the magic of what makes Orange so unique. But man, when he does this here, I thought it was just really well done. At the end, though, Bischoff declares Orange the winner on the strength of his response to global warming. Bischoff's delivery, it's like, that global warming answer really got me. Again, Bischoff has some great timing, some great comedic timing. Anyway, after the debate is over and Orange is declared the winner, Jake Hager, who's at ringside, he jumps Orange, and then Jericho hits the Judas effect on him. That's building some nice heat for their one-on-one match next week, their big rematch. And, God, the debate, I didn't know how much it was going to get me hyped up for that match next week, but I think it did a really good job. Well, Britt Baker has said that Big Swole can have a match against her in the future if Swole defeats an opponent of Britt's choosing. And this week she chooses Reba/Rebel. I had a hunch last week that it was going to be Rebel, and I was 1 for 2 in my predictions for this week's Dynamite. Rebel gets a little bit of heat in the match, and she cannot believe how well she's doing. She goes for a second rope moonsault after getting scared about going to the top rope. She misses it, eats a discus elbow, and Swole wins the match. So she will take on Britt at a later date, probably All Out. Here's your one and only women's match for the night, folks. Maybe 4 minutes long for the whole segment. Now, go and drop $50 for our new fan club, folks. That was the big story that dropped on Wednesday was, AEW, the AEW Heels. It's basically like a fan club for lady fans, and it's gotten a mixed response at best. I admire what they are trying to do in making this. It feels like they have good intentions, but I feel this should have been workshopped a bit before it went live and public to everyone. It's not a great look. It's meant to be about inclusion, but first of all, you're putting it all behind a paywall. It's another subscription, and not everyone can really afford that right now. And so right away, you're already making this thing that's about inclusion kind of exclusive in that way by putting the paywall behind it. Also, their language, not as inclusive as they may think it is, because they're saying female fans, but also you're not really taking into account people who are transgender, people who are non-binary, people who are gender fluid, and that doesn't really fit into that category at all. So there's no place for them really either. And also important, how can fans be expected to take this whole thing seriously when AEW barely takes its women's division seriously, period? I mean, they're barely on TV. There's barely any high-profile matches with the women on the main programming, and not to mention, the women's tag team tournament has begun online. It's not even being given the time of day on television. So yeah, the whole thing needs work. All we're asking for, all people are asking for, is just more and better representation on television. That's all we're asking for, and they're giving fans this $50 a year fan club. Main event time as Jon Moxley defends the AEW title against Darby Allin. Kind of like a student-teacher relationship they have going on here, or kind of like a master-protege thing. I forgot to mention earlier, there's a great promo from Jon Moxley where he talks about this matchup and how, when he was younger, he didn't listen to people who had his best interest in his health and his well-being in mind. And so now he sees the same kind of thing. It's kind of come full circle where he feels that like he wants to tell Darby to stay down in the match and don't keep getting up, but he knows that Darby won't listen because he wouldn't have either. This match here was great. A lot of heart by Allin shown against Moxley. As the match goes on, Wardlow distracts the referee, which allows MJF to run in, deck Moxley with the championship belt, which causes Moxley to bleed a lot. Not quite the level of Matt Hardy, but still a lot in his own right. Darby hits one coffin drop. We get a kick out, goes for another one and falls right into a rear naked choke, but he keeps fighting and fighting. Finally, Moxley reluctantly plants him with the paradigm shift to win the match and retain, and MJF's upset by this, and we see Moxley kind of cradling Darby in his arms as we fade to black. Kind of a tender moment there at the end. I thought it was a really solid main event between these guys, and further building the tension, I know words, against Moxley and MJF for the future. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite, and this week my choice is Dynamite. Now I will admit, last week, in hindsight, I probably should have gone with NXT to win that one, but this week, to me, it feels there's not as much of a toss-up. It's not much of a competition for me. I think that the wrestling side definitely belonged to NXT this week. Overall, quality of wrestling was better. But again, as far as the storytelling goes and the things that captivate me and things I care about and make me want to watch next week, I think AEW wins here. The Pat McAfee Adam Cole angle in NXT has shown me that NXT right now has a real problem with top level heels. Like, there's a lot of heels right now on NXT's roster, but like right now, none of them feel like they could really kind of be in that kind of top tier position. I think with maybe a few weeks of work, you could get there, but like right now they're not. And I don't think Pat McAfee is the solution. Maybe he's a stopgap, but I feel that the fact that they had to go to that well for that and to justify Adam Cole face turn tells me there's a problem with the face and heel dynamic right now in NXT. This is not the NXT that we all know and love. Something feels amiss right now. And I've been very forgiving, I think, on programming in general across all the companies because of the situation we live in today in the pandemic and everything. But there's some things that still, you have to kind of scrutinize, and right now that's my biggest problem right now with NXT. But let me know what you thought about the shows this week in the comments section below, and stay tuned for this Friday night when I have my SmackDown review live. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.